The Jets could use free agency or the draft to upgrade their wide receiver position, but there's also a third option available to us. Let's take a look at 4 players I think could be available via trade for the New York Jets.
JETS, 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 Jets!
Welcome to Jets Talk. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot today. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Guys, Mondays 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I do my live call-in show, and Tuesdays at 9 o'clock, we do our Talking Jets panel with O'Leary, Greenbean, and David, so tune into those if you want to talk about any more of these topics. But let's get right into it. We'll talk about the 4 wide receivers I think the Jets could potentially go after via the trade market. The first player up on our list is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. This shook the Jets world a little bit a few weeks ago. We have the obviously polarizing Odell Beckham Jr., someone that has been an elite weapon in this league, a first-round pick in, I believe it was, 2015 at this point now. He's going to be 27 years old. He has 4 years at about $14 million a year left on his contract, which makes him about the 14th highest paid wide receiver, give or take a little bit, depending on what happens with the wide receiver contracts this offseason. He has expressed interest in wanting to come back to New York, and this is interesting for me because it's obviously, he played for the Giants. As a Jet fan, we got to watch him kind of tear apart the league, which was awesome, but that has now been a few years removed. So what would the Jets have to give up for him? I think the value is going to have to be a second or third round pick because the Jets are not going to give up their first number 11th overall pick to get Odell Beckham Jr. You can draft Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb at that pick. It doesn't make sense to get a high-priced free agent high-priced wide receiver when you can just get a young, cheap replacement for that same pick. But a second or third round pick, which you could, feasibly spend on a wide receiver as well, you could get a proven talent. So I think this is, right around the value that I think Odell should be worth. So for a second or third round pick, I think I would think about it. It doesn't really make sense to me, though, because Odell Beckham Jr. came out and accused Greg Williams, the Jets defensive coordinator, for trying to injure him in a game when he was still on the Giants.
I had players on this team telling me that that's what he was telling them to do, take me out of the game in this preseason. So you just know who he is.
Aside from that really awkward sort of relationship that they're going to have, I don't know. I don't really see this making much sense for the Jets. He seeks too much attention. He plays too much of the Odell brand, and I don't think he has enough of the team aspect at heart. Yes, it would be the Jets' best wide receiver in a while, and I think there is a price on it. Like, if we can get him for, I think a third-round pick is what I would feel comfortable giving up. I could probably be talked into a second, but third-round pick is probably where I see that that value kind of sitting at. And he's just had a whole bunch of really head-scratching incidences over the years. He's fought with a kicking net. He's had issues, with his emotions overflowing on the sideline. He slapped a cop on the butt and gave out a bunch of cash to the LSU players after the championship game. So sort of questionable behavior. Sounds like a diva. Sounds like someone who's just seeking attention. So third-round pick for Odell Beckham Jr., I could probably do that. Anything higher, I'd probably pass on it. The next player up on our list is going to be Jeffery, the wide receiver from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this connection ties back to Joe Douglas, who is, of course, from the Eagles organization. He is now our GM. It also dates back to the Adam Gase era back in 2015 when Jeffery played for Gase in Chicago. So those two connections are going to be brought up a lot in reference to Jeffery. He's 30 years old. He's a big body target at 6'3". Would add a different dimension to this Jets wide receiving core, I think. I don't think he's really similar to a lot of the guys that are out on this list or in our current receiving core. As for his contract, it's a little weird because he's got a 4-year contract, but 2 of those years are voidable years. So it's really just a 2-year contract. And after you factor out the signing bonus, the Jets would be on the hook for $10 million this year and $13 million next year, which would make him about the 25th highest paid receiver this year and 16th highest paid receiver next year. Now, the issue with this is that if the Eagles were to trade his contract, they would actually lose $1 million in cap space. So there's no benefit to them trying to move him unless they're trying to get cap space for next season. If that's how they value it, okay, that you could do that, I guess. But it seems like they would want to hold on to him at least for this year since they're not going to see that cap benefit anyway. They could cut him after next year and save a pretty good amount of money. But let's say they want to get some draft capital this year to maybe put some juice into the team. You're talking maybe a late round pick. We got Brandon Marshall from the Chicago Bears. He was 30 years old roughly. So we got him and a 7th round pick for a 5th round pick. So I think if you can get Alshon Jeffery for a 5th or 6th round pick, I would do it. I think it's worth rolling the dice on. I'm of the belief that the Jets have $75 million in cap space, and I don't particularly see us being able to spend all that cap space. If they want to get more than that for Alshon Jeffery, I would not give that up. I don't think he has been productive or healthy enough over the course of the last few years. I don't think he has been able to, he hasn't put up 1,000 yards in over 6 years. So that's very frustrating. He did have his highest yards per game under Adam Gase in Chicago, so there is that to kind of hang your hat on. And maybe you're not trading for him to be that number one stud wide receiver if you're giving up a 5th or 6th round pick. So I think it's all based on expectation and what you think you can do with the cap space that you're allocating to it. Like, this is going to be a very hefty contract for someone that really hasn't been overly productive or overly healthy for his team the last few years. The next player up on our list is probably the most promising player in my opinion, and that's Stefon Diggs. He's 26 years old. He has 4 years remaining on his contract at about $12 million a year after you factor out the signing bonus. That puts him at about the 16th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL for the next 4 years, pending, obviously increasing contracts. He has removed the Vikings from all his social media platforms, and he has been the most productive of the wide receivers, I think, on this list in terms of his yards and in terms of what he is potentially capable of in the future. I do think this would probably cost us a 2nd round pick, and at that point, I think I'd be okay with it because you're getting a very, very young star wide receiver. And Diggs isn't without some of his headaches. He's had issues with Kirk Cousins as far as not getting him the ball enough and, having a little bit of frustrations overflow on the sidelines this past year. So look, there's going to be a little bit of contention here, but I think he's just looking for a fresh start, and I don't necessarily think this would be an issue moving forward. I would definitely sign up for this for a 2nd round pick. I think he is young enough, cheap enough, and, enough upside to warrant this kind of selection, rather than taking a lottery ticket in the 2nd round on a wide receiver. So that's where I would stand. 2nd round pick would definitely do it for Stefon Diggs. The final player on my list is not someone that the Jets have really been associated with, and it's someone that I think could potentially be an option either way. And that's Robert Woods. He's 28 years old. He's kind of stuck behind Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks out in LA on the Rams, and I don't necessarily think that not that they don't want to hold on to him. I think they could hold on to him because his contract is really favorable. But this is a team that just gave away their 1st round pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars for Jalen Ramsey. They are hurting for cap space. They need some young players on some cheap contracts. I think he's going to be a little bit more expensive, and I think you'd have to pay for, the price that contract is. It's a cheaper contract, so I think you're going to pay a little bit more for it. So let's say it's a 2nd round value pick. It's 2 years at $5 million and $9 million. That's 45th highest paid wide receiver and 31st highest paid wide receiver consecutively a year, or in consecutive years. He has been the most productive in terms of potential points earned over the last few years of the 4 receivers on this list. Believe it or not, I didn't believe it. But I see him more as a 2nd overall receiver. I don't really see him as a number 1 wide receiver threat. So I think the number 1 wide receiver that you'd get in the draft in the 2nd round might be more valuable than the 2nd round pick you're going to have to spend on Robert Woods. Even though it's a guaranteed player, you have him for 2 years. There's a few benefits that go onto it. I think, since he's had 1,000 yards over the last 2 years, you could see that sort of value in him. I think you'd probably still need to bring in another wide receiver in free agency. If you could get him for a 3rd round pick, I would probably do it. I think a 2nd round pick's a little too rich for me. I'd rather Stefon Diggs at that point. Guys, let me know what you think of this list down below. Is there someone that you think we should go after outside of this? Is there someone on another team that I didn't bring up? Let me know what you guys think of down below in the comments. And as always, go Jets.